Before we dive into the code though, I want to show you the output of the program that he built. You can see in this first input that we have a JavaScript object defined that gives us an interval and a word to print at that interval. We can also define the count that we want to move from 1 to 50 in this case. And if you examine the output of this application, you'll see that for every interval of 3, it does print fizz. For every interval of 5, it does print buzz. And then for an interval of both 3 and 5, in other words, every 15, it prints fizzbuzz. This does correctly solve the problem, and it does it in a rather interesting way by using this JavaScript object to define the intervals of when to print what word. Moving on to the program.js file, we can see a pretty simple function in here, but there is one particular problem in here that I don't like. He's defined this as a global function in the JavaScript runtime. There isn't a module wrapped around this or an immediately invoking function expression, and there's no namespace object that it's hanging off of, so any code anywhere in the JavaScript would be able to access this function. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of time to clean this up. And we have a number of options for doing that. We could, for example, wrap everything inside of an immediately invoking function expression, which is done by declaring a function inside of a parenthesis set, and then outside of that parenthesis set, add another parenthesis set to immediately invoke the function that was defined. In this case, that really wouldn't do us any good though, because we've now scoped this program function to this immediately invoking function directly, and it's not going to be useful to us because we're not going to have access to it. Now the fizzbuzz command handler doesn't really need to change at all. Once again, we're dealing with a protocol or an API that doesn't have an explicit interface definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut all of this code, and in its place I'm going to go ahead and put a jQuery DOM-ready function, and then I'm going to call fizzbuzz.start. And this is the only code that I want to see inside of my index.html. Now this fizzbuzz.start method doesn't actually exist yet, so we need to create it.